Hello everyone and welcome to Total War News. My name is Cody Bonds. Today's episode is Warhammer 3's patch 3.1 stock report. Which factions are up, which factions are down, and who will be getting their long-awaited regiments of renown. Let's jump right in. The recently added endgame crises have been extremely popular, so the Chaos Dwarfs are getting in on the action, with the Will of Hashut, where they plan to take over the world and you must find a way to stop them and infiltrate their tunnels before they conquer the entire world. More regiments of renown have been added to Game 3's base races, and the first one starts off with Grand Cathay's Bandits of the Silver Road. Armed with shields, flaming missile attacks, and vanguard deployment, these bandits are ready to indiscriminately pillage any buttholes they happen to come across. The Hounds of the Blood Hunt prove just how much Khorne hates magic, and any cowardly mages they fight will find that magical attacks are completely useless against them as they are immune to all hostile magic. The Watchmen of the Night are the Tsarina of Kislev's not-so-secret secret police, and also a fun Game of Thrones reference. Instead of the pistols that normal armored Kossars use, they favor a second-hand weapon, making them solid anti-infantry combatants. And they have the Rabble-Rouse ability to help keep nearby troops immune to fear and terror. The Frolickers Bubonic are Nurglings that have dropped the Cloud of Flies ability in favor of a new one called Blisterback, which allows the unit to deal damage back at their opponent every time they are hit in melee. The lack of Cloud of Flies helps the unit get hit more often, which in turn triggers the damage reflection more often. The Princes of Perfection are the hardest, staunchest, most rigid spears that Slaanesh has access to. With perfect vigor and soporific musk, they're the perfect addition to any Slaanesh anvil line and can always be counted on as hard men who keep a rigid line even under the fiercest pounding. The Chromatic Aberrations are blue horrors that have a bit more ammo than a standard unit, as well as a powerful barrier replenishment ability that triggers anytime a spell is cast on the battlefield, and that includes both friendly and enemy spellcasters, which when you're playing Tzeentch is pretty much constantly. Boglars of the Mad Marshes are proof that CA hasn't forgotten that they made the Ogre Kingdoms. They just really don't like them. Boglars come with poison as standard, but they also have the uncanny ability to regenerate entities whenever they are standing in water, which has to be one of the most situationally specific abilities ever put onto a unit. CA made sure to throw in a Mogwai joke here, but frankly, the entire Ogre faction still plays like one that got fed after midnight. Which brings me to the other forgotten race that I actually care about, Bretonnia. CA took inspiration from two of the better mods on the Steam Workshop and has decided to reduce the entity count of the Grail Knights, making them more elite and heavy-hitting. Both Grail Knights and Grail Guardians also now deal the majority of their damage as armor-piercing, making them a lot deadlier in late-game combat. All Knights and Knight characters receive the new Knight attribute, and do not take any leadership penalties if any dirty peasant units nearby rout. All peasants, though, have the Peasant attribute, which frankly has no inherent gameplay effect, but the Bretonnian Knights felt it was important that they're labeled such. The peasants did receive the Peasant's Duty ability though, where anyone with that trait now gain 8 additional leadership if they are within 55 meters of a knight, though peasant infantry overall have had their leadership reduced to account for this change. Knights Errant now get the Impetuous trait, and any unit within 35 meters of them become immune to psychology for 30 seconds when they charge. There are a host of other minor tweaks, but with the new changes to Knight and Peasant designations, the Grail Reliquary has been relieved of its leadership buffing role, because it was redundant. Instead, it now has the Icon of Devotion ability. It buffs nearby melee attack, and can be combined with nearby units like Knights or Paladins to give a good synergy within your frontline army. But let's be frank here, you now have even less reason to bring it into a battle. While all of these changes will definitely improve the experience of Bretonnian gameplay, nothing short of additional units or possibly even a DLC focus will ever bring the faction up to the same level of players as the other ones on offer. In addition to the usual raft of bug fixes and AI tweaks, the tooltip and stats related to unit mass have been updated across the board, making it so that all light cavalry, regular cavalry, heavy shot cavalry, monsters cavalry, and character cavalry should have the same designated mass within their bracket, and should be more consistent across the board. Mass is one of those things that's kind of hard to see during gameplay, but just know it has to do with how much it pushes a unit on impact and how easily they can pass through other units like infantry. For individual faction pricing and balancing, I will not be reading all the stat changes, as this video needs to end sometime before next week. With the balancing of mass, Beastmen chariots now hit harder and have more mass and should perform better in battle. Bretonia got so many changes, this could almost be considered a soft old world update for them, all of which should be considered net positives. So if you've been holding off on trying their campaign as they didn't seem to have enough punch, now is a good time to try them out. Surprising no one, certain units in the Chaos Dwarf roster were overpowered and needed nerfs. Astrogoth, Bull Centaur Renders, and the Naphtha bomb-wielding Infernal Ironsworn have all been hit with a nerf stick. But the Kadai, which were a bit of paper tigers, have been made a bit less fragile. Also, the Iron Daemons can now move and shoot properly, while the Skullcracker has been given better combat stance and the improved ability to knock back enemies at lower speeds. The Nurgle changes have to do with consistency of animations and will not be noticed by 99% of you. Instead, look for actual changes to come in the Thrones of Decay DLC coming out later this year. Ogre spellcasters are now immune to contact effects, meaning those things they get hit with like poison from enemy weapons, and is meant to better reflect their tabletop rules. Greasus's Everyone Has Their Price ability has also been reworked slightly, making it an AoE spell as opposed to a targeted single unit use. As one lord in the Vampire Coast shares some units with Bretonia, they technically got a buff in this update, and if you ever happen to get some peasants in your army, they will perform better accordingly. Replacing the Vampire Count's Raise Dead mechanic with the new RNG-based Dead Rise Again has been difficult to balance, and again they are tweaking it downwards. So if you've been fighting never-ending undead legions in your campaign, well, I guess you won't be now, even though that's kind of their entire thing. Bladesingers and War Dancers now benefit from access to 2 different dances instead of a single dance. These dances are mutually exclusive, and so activating a dance will disable the other, just like how Bladesingers already work. What dance is available does change depending on if you're using War Dancers with Azrai Spears, or the Bladesingers. It's interesting that this is sort of a soft version of weapon swapping, and something we thought we'd see a lot more of in Warhammer 3, so it's nice to see it being brought back in through the patches. Looking forward, a new free legendary hero will be released today in relation to the Blood for the Blood Gods event for Warhammer's 40th anniversary, and you can find details about them on this channel soon. And barring any hotfixes, this will be the last update until Update 4.0, which is the Tzeentch Kislev Cathay DLC, coming sometime, quote, in the summer, which is probably July or maybe August. And that is all of today's Total War news. This has been Cody Bonds. Thanks for watching.